Hello, good evening, and welcome. My name is Christy Barlow, and I'm the School and Community Programs Senior Manager at the Jewel Colin Smith Museum of Fine Art at Auburn University. I am so pleased that you have decided to join us tonight for Third Thursday Poetry. As I read through some of Tim Seibles' fantastic work, I was reminded of one of the newest additions to the museum's collection, Delita Martin's If It Falls Behind, Pick It Up. In this large scale work, Martin deftly layers not only color, pattern, and symbol and materials, but also personal memory and larger traditions. Siebel's poems have also been described as approaching topics such as racial tension, class conflict, and intimacy from several directions all at once, also building multiple layers in his work. You can find images of Delita Martin's work, If It Falls Behind, Pick It Up, on the museum's website at jcsm.auburn.edu. There you'll also find information on 1072, a campaign for collecting and conserving art, an important initiative that raises funds to purchase artworks like Martin's, and this year the campaign is dedicated to obtaining works by women of color to expand our collection and also the larger art history narrative. Thank you to those who've already contributed, and I invite you to view Martin's work and other recent purchases in person when the museum reopens to the public on February 9th with limited capacity. Before I turn things over, I'd also like to acknowledge our campus partners in the Department of English, whose continued collaboration allows us to showcase the arts in its many varied forms. And now I'm pleased to introduce Ken Autry for the rest of tonight's program.
Thank you, Christy. I am Ken Autry, one of the coordinators of the Third Thursday Reading Program, and I welcome all of you to this evening's virtual reading. Thanks to the Jewel Colin Smith Museum of Fine Arts in Auburn for helping to sponsor this series, and we also receive support from the Alabama State Council on the Arts and the National Endowment for the Arts. This has been a good week for poetry. Last Wednesday, no doubt many of you saw Amanda Gorman, Youth Poet of the United States, read her beautiful and inspiring inauguration poem, The Hill We Climb. And whatever you may think of Joe Biden, he at least is a president who loves poetry, especially Irish poetry, and quotes it frequently. It's our good fortune tonight to have Tim Seibles with us to inaugurate the 9th year of the Third Thursday Reading Series in Auburn. Our guest taught for many years at Old Dominion University and for 2 years served as Virginia's Poet Laureate. He's published 6 full volumes and 2 chapbooks. He's published in outstanding literary magazines such as Poetry, Beloit Poetry Journal, Shenandoah, Plowshares, countless others. His work appeared in the Best American Poetry of 2010, and he is a frequent presenter at universities and literary festivals in the U.S. and abroad. Our guest's earlier work in volumes such as Hammerlock and Buffalo Head Solos document his coming of age in Philadelphia, his immersion in pop culture and music, his awakening to the mysteries of women, and to the agonies of racial conflict in our society. Despite his urban orientation, he remains grounded in the world of nature, the turning of the seasons, and as he writes in one poem, the mad earth publishing her many million murmuring unsaids. His most recent books, both available from Etruscan Press, are Fast Animal and One Turn Around the Sun. They sustain some of his earlier themes while displaying an increasing interest in form and presentation on the page. In particular, Tim is a master of the challenging Villanelle form. In One Turn Around the Sun, he reflects at length on his parents, as well as his own maturity. His longer poems in this collection provide ambitious and thrilling renderings of his life at middle age. I should say that at the end of Tim's reading, we will entertain a few questions, and so you should feel free to add a question to the chat box, and we'll have access to those after Tim's reading. And now, Tim, let me welcome you to Auburn virtually. And we're delighted to have you here. And
Thanks.
Seibles.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be here. And I didn't realize that the third Thursday reading series was 9 years old. Has been going on a long time. I would love to establish a reading series here that would last so long. Anyway, I wanted to start with an ode. It's called Ode to Your Mother. And I wanted to read this because I think oftentimes we forget that however many conflicts and disagreements we may have with our moms over the years, she did carry us around for 9 months inside her body. It's kind of something we just don't talk about, but what a strange notion, right? So I wrote this poem. I used some of the things my mother told me about being pregnant with me, and just, of course, my own imaginings about this journey we take from conception into the world. I think that's really all I need to say about the poem. It's just kind of a romp through the possibilities of coming here. Ode to Your Mother. Do you remember yourself 6 months after conception, far from the egg, your heart chirping like a hungry chick, those unwalked feet, fat crickets kicking around, eyes blind as buttons, cell by cell, rod by cone, getting ready to call up the colors and lights. And your mother, often craving licorice with apple pie, outside catching a bus with you in her warm pond, a golden koi nosing the surface for bits of bread. You, the unnamed stranger, coming for the long stay, traveling all night, your face taking shape in the shadows. Or maybe she sees herself, a bass drum with something booming inside her, a small theater off Broadway with someone soon to be famous pacing the wings. So much promise. Were you restless to begin? All your vitals rehearsing their hard parts. Did you have any sense that she was out there? Your brain almost building itself, a secret mansion, 1,000,000 doors to 1,000,000 rooms, each with a candle. Your little head holding the Milky Way, rekindled in miniature. Consciousness, the great mischief, waking up to try again. One particular flicker in the cosmic sea, a starfish riding the big back of a blue whale, which swims like a planet, gliding the sun's slow waves, with you beginning to insist inside this woman you hardly know, though she is everything, steadying her new weight on earth. Your heart, blind as a kite, wind on the rise, 3 months from day. Did you suppose an inkling of what would be out there? The invisible air filling us up, rabbits in hats, hints, houses, banana slugs, bacteria and trees. Other people, the look on your face, already amazed, or whatever comes just before that. This is a poem called Born. born. Is this how it begins? A cry that does not know who's crying. Consciousness filling your head like smoke. The brain, a burning house, first surge of self as a thing apart. Scorched, the shock of touch, smell, and somehow hunger, the need to have what you cannot have without help. The unintentional world, wayward, aloof, then maybe relief in someone's arms. Is this where your heart rises, then tilts between hunger and the moment you are fed? The mind sprung by want, your mouth, the first taste, the forgetting where you are and what's to come. When I was younger, I spent much of my time under the governance of my brother's advice. And this poem is called Notes from Big Bra, Tom the Bomb. I built this poem out of things that he actually said to me. Okay, Notes from Big Bra, Tom the Bomb. Don Juan of Germantown High School, 1967 to 68. This is what happens if you have a big brother who is crazy and you're trying to learn about girls. I say, Tom, there's this girl. He says, is she fine like apple wine? She fine enough to be a friend of mine? Her name is Tina. So you want to give Tina your wiener? And Doc's having a party. Is she tuned to your station? She believe in what you faking? And she's going to be there. Tell her you know the way to San Jose. Tell her you got to graze in her grass. Tell her you ain't too proud to beg. Yeah, you gots to rock Hudson on her. Give her the movie star moon gazer, the look of love. Say, my duty is your booty. Tell her your Peter is sweeter and you know how to treat her. You gotta sing a little bit, a little brother. That's to hit her with a little bit of Sinatra. Everybody loves my body sometime. This is a Villanelle. I thank you, Ken, for saying what you said about my work with this form. It is my favorite form, partly because it reminds me of the blues. And what interests me about this is that the Villanelle emerges in France, I believe, among the French peasantry, I believe. I could be wrong. It could be the Italian peasantry. I get these things mixed up. But it started as a kind of singing pattern, a singing in the round, in the fields, you know. And blues, of course, is rooted in field hollers, which were another kind of singing for people, for Black folks in the fields of America to make the work go easier. So the Villanelle does for Europeans who are working in the fields what the blues and hollers, I should say, hollers precede the blues, what hollers did for Black folks in the fields. So this is called Sometimes Freddie Blues Villanelle, and this is for Freddie Porter. He was probably the first person I ever met who had mental illness. We were young. We didn't really understand what was going on. Sometimes Freddie blues Villanelle. Sometimes Freddie would talk to the trees, and the brothers would just laugh half the time. But a few of them said, "Have mercy on me." Think about all that good sunlight you see. Yet somehow the days peel away like rind. Mostly Freddie just talked to the trees. Branches say something when they shake in the breeze. Believe what you want, but it could be a sign. Maybe they're saying, "Have mercy on me." Sundays I sit with a brain full of fleas and listen to people speak for the divine. Wish they would go and just talk to the trees. Hiding a scream is like holding a sneeze. It's all you can do not to lose your damn mind. I see why people say, "Have mercy on me." I'm starting to list like a ship in rough seas. I guess you just have to laugh half the time and think about Freddie and walk with the trees. I look at my watch, but my watch is a tease. Or maybe it's always 9:15. Them thin little hands have mercy on me. Think about SpongeBob with his home in the sea. Wouldn't you visit if you had the time? Sometimes Freddie would talk to the trees. You can see why I say mercy, mercy on me. This is a poem called Ode to the Banjo. I did some research on the banjo because I have some friends who play banjo. And they were talking about, you should write a poem about the banjo. And I didn't know anything about banjos. So anyway, I did this research, and I found out some amazing things about the banjo. A lot of people don't know that the banjo originates in Africa. I think we associate it with bluegrass music, with white Americans. But Black folks from Africa brought that instrument here, from Africa during the age of slavery. And it was abandoned because it was used in kind of these degrading, like blackface shows. And so Black folks turned away from the instrument. But it's funny, its history goes back to Africa. Ode to the Banjo. Not the cold night howl of the cello, not the soul-rolling scold of the sax, no flash fire frenzy of flamenco guitar, nor the oboe's hypnotic threnody. We all know your call, brother banjo, your sweet choirs of glee, the giggle of children spritzing your frets, that touch of puppy love, ecstatic and blue, each note quick, complete, as if your pot belly were already almost too full to speak. Where did you get that savory tang? How far have you traveled? What oceans, what ancient music still stashed in your magic bones? The ngoni, the lute-like zalim, the long-necked akonting, your African ancestors. The music is proof. The people who brought you here were more, always more than slaves. Your friendly notes, a gaggle of drunken bells, songbirds, small stars the lonely bring to light the coming dark. If a heartful song could unspill all the blood lost in this world, it would be yours. Your plucky laugh, your aria, so often misunderstood. How many centuries have you sprung into music? All the years, a single melody mapped in your grin. Who would dare mock your wise and supple ways? Only those who do not know that they do not know the truth for which you play. 5 fingers, 5 strings, 5 secrets, forever told, but never given away. Here's another poem. If I can lay my hands on it. This poem is called Turn It Up. When I was in high school, I had a friend, one of very few of my friends who were actually gang members. And I saw him years later. We were both in our 30s. And we were just talking about gangs, just for a minute. I never saw him again after this. It's so interesting. I ran into him one day downtown, out of nowhere. And we just talked for a minute. And he said, brothers in gangs, man, they don't see no other way. And I never forgot that. And he also, that's the epigraph of this poem, which is called Turn It Up. The other epigraph is, hey, DJ, run that back, by Ludacris. Days when I think I might live forever. Sunlight standing on the corner, brim bent to one side, nothing to remember. The breeze changing shape, one leaf, then another, a whole branch smiling. What I want to say is this. You do not have to die. You do not have to die. With your eyes broken and blood burning your fists. Brothers, today is a door, the hour still open. Though the trap has been set, though the graves keep calling, we do not have to listen. Look, after all these years, time still lives down around the way, across from the schoolyard, waiting for everybody to come over. The plates are hot, the bass is banging, the DJ don't stop. Untie your hands, turn up your heart. This is a poem called The Dollars. The epigraph is, I'm all in, the dollars. Do they own you? Do they make you do whatever they want? Do they own you? Do you work and pay and work? Are you nervous? Is it hard to sleep? Do they got you? Was it hard to wake up? What about your hair? Does it keep happening? Are you doing your best? Do you need a little something? Are you dressed? Are you getting dressed? Are you almost dressed? What about your hair? Are you tired? Are you hard to wake up? What time is it? How about now? Do they need more? Did they make you over? Are you half dressed? Do they own you? Do you think what you're supposed to? Are you saving? Who are you saving? Are you nervous? Are they watching? Is it hard? Do you ever wake up? Do they own you? Do you wake up when they want you to? Are they everywhere? Are you on time? How about now? How about now? Do you do the work? Did you do the do? Did they do you? Are you trying to get dressed? Are you? Did you? Will you? Do they own you? Do they still own you? This is a poem called Poem at 64. It's dedicated to Michael Ryan, who was my very, very first creative writing teacher. When I was probably, 20 years old, he had a poem out called Poem at 30. So I wrote this poem not too long after my father died. And this is Poem at 64. Always surprised to be the age I am, though I guess everything since puberty I remember. That first wet dream, leaving home for college, Shaft in Africa, scooping ice cream at Swenson's. And I am by now, by all appearances, someone who has succeeded somehow, while a few good friends and early loves have left this life, passed away, gone on, like my dad would quip and shrug. What to do about so much vanishing? The lazy grin you won't see jump to a laugh. That voicemail you cannot answer. And finding your own jolly self in line for departure, not wanting to go, but traipsing to the exit anyway. Like drifting toward the door near the end of a party, chatting with her and him, hugging some, squeezing hands, and then you're completely outside. Streetlights and shadowy trees walking you to the car. It just doesn't matter, maybe. Maybe it just doesn't matter what we think about death. That grief is harder than anything anyone can do. My father, with his love for Count Basie and lumpy buttermilk, is now ashes. He has gone on, joined the chapter invisible, as his Kappa brothers would say. I remember him at 64, forking sardines from those flat cans, some nights pretending to be Red Fox, then trudging up the stairs like any other unfamous man. This was 25 years before he found himself staring down the rifleman on TV, almost nonchalantly waiting for his diaper change. No one ever imagines. I don't imagine ever struggling with a fork, hoping someone will come to feed me. My mother, slow strolling the Alzheimer's road, still doesn't know she's a widow. One time she asked about that man who used to be here, the way you'd inquire about a friend not seen since high school or an ice cream shop closed long ago. I'm not mad at anybody. Got nobody to blame. Though a bad feeling keeps pushing me around like Big Sid used to back in 7th grade. Today I'm 64, born 64 years ago today. And I might be here again next year. But right now, if I could make the time and make myself less afraid, I would cry like a baby for everyone. This is the Polite Blues Villanelle. Polite Blues Villanelle. I guess I'm just tired of being polite. My handshakes get flimsy. This smile's a dud. Wish I could sleep for the rest of my life. The sun always comes for its hungerless bite. I yell at my heart to work up my blood. I'd rather be snoring than being polite. You try to get dressed, but your blue jeans fit tight. Your body gone soft, like you stuffed it with mud. Are you tempted to sleep for the rest of your life? It's been a long time since I slept through a night. Does everyone marry a head full of crud? And how can I do this, doing polite? What do you do when not doing feels right? Love rolls at the start, but craps out with a grudge. It'd be better to sleep for the rest of your life. I meant to do more, but my soul got the blight. Been trying to shake free, but the bullshit won't budge. It starts to wear thin, this wearing polite. I want to live rude, fly naked and right. Probably should toss my bad brain in a tub. Then I'd be dead for the rest of my life. Distraction just ain't the same thing as delight. Am I crazy to sing with this mace in my blood? Guess I'm just tired of seeming polite. Some say I should sleep for the rest of my life. This is a poem called Not Nearly Enough for Cesar Vallejo, a great Peruvian poet. Yesterday, maybe tomorrow, perhaps, but today, no one is reading my poems. No one at all. It's as if my whole life had been covered like a parrot's cage so everybody can get some sleep. I didn't mean to shout, to blaspheme, to interrupt, to curse, use slang, obsess over women's thighs. I did not mean to cause trouble. Did I? Maybe I did. Of course I did, but for the best possible reasons. One, there's no pretty way to fight ugliness. Two, there's not nearly enough love going around. Three, nowhere near an adequate array of sexual. Four, collaborations. In fact, a wild. Five, lack of empathy and daring, especially. Six, from God, who has fallen wildly. Seven, short of my expectations. Where is the man who sees war on TV and runs screaming naked down the street with the head of his Johnson flapping back and forth, thigh to thigh, like a flag in a jockless wind? And with her marvelously chocolate boobaroos, glossed with sunlight and saliva, where is the woman who burst into Our Lady of Hope Cathedral singing, "Tell me something good"? We see children. We were children with dolls that peed, with wooden trucks and wind-up frogs and hide and seek, who knew better than what our parents said. Tell me, how did we let these fuckheads run the world off the road? We cannot tuck our brains up our asses and wonder why self-sucking morons come to power with their sad toupees, their burger-driven breath, their prune-sized hearts, and then act shocked when our lives fit like barbed wire braziers. This is mostly what I've been trying to get at with poetry. But maybe I overthink, maybe I hyperbolize, maybe I pile on, maybe I've lost sight of what people really want, which is to cuddle the status quo like a syphilitic teddy bear. My mother used to say before giving me a good slap on the mouth, "You have gotten beside yourself, you onion-headed little maniac." And she's right. I am standing beside myself this minute, staring at myself, staring back at myself, asking with a double dose of musty contempt, why aren't you reading my poems? This is a poem called Seeking Asylum. I've written a series of poems in which the poem itself is a character in the poem. I'm not the first one to do this. I think there's a kind of quiet tradition of writing about the poem as if it's a living thing. But in my mind, poems are living things, really are. Anyway, this poem is called Seeking Asylum, and the title runs right into the body of the poem. Seeking asylum, the poem enters quietly, without any state-approved ID, with nothing that says where it belongs. Many things had become unbearable, so much so that when the official asks, "Why did you leave your country?" the poem turns its palms up and sobs at the shiny white vinyl walls until two uniforms haul it out the door, down the hall, bruised into the bustling lunchtime street, where the blur of pedestrians every few steps is punctuated by homeless persons, some screaming as if to disprove their invisibility, some curdled like commas on the sidewalk. A wind pats down the trees. Heavy clouds have come uninvited, crowding the city sky. Maybe I can't belong anywhere the poem mutters, so no one will hear. Maybe I should have said, I gotta leave because there's nowhere left to go. Though the poem, who'd spent its life trying to be clear, knew those words didn't make any sense. Being itself a stranger estranged, the poem is bugged by a niggling question about its own true origins. But who really cares about that? The poem shouts, and the back-to-work citizens veer and scatter. In some shop windows, the poem almost sees its face. Brown, indelible, familiar, disappearing quietly like the mist that had just begun to fall. All right. One more poem and then let's have some Q&A, right? I'll read you this poem. I'll read you this poem. Why not? I don't think I've ever read this poem aloud. It's dedicated to Colin Kaepernick. He is the black quarterback who was basically banned from professional football when he started that protest against police brutality by kneeling at the games. It's called Game Day for Colin Kaepernick. His situation fascinates me for a couple of reasons. I'll say this before I begin. One is when I was a young guy, from probably the time I was 4 or 5 until I was 19, I wanted to play football professionally so bad I could hardly bear it. You know, I thought about football all the time. And I slept with my football. This is the kind of obsession I had. I was going to be the greatest wide receiver ever to have played the game. And I was a pretty good receiver. I could catch a lot of things. But the world, has different ways of tilting our lives. And I didn't realize it, but with some disappointments in college and I left football, I found myself in that creative writing workshop I told you about with Michael Ryan. And truthfully, as I look at it now, I realize probably my deepest, if I have any real fundamental talent, it's probably with language, not with football, though I love football and I was a reasonably good player. Anyway, this is called Game Day. And anyway, it's close to me for a number of reasons. Here they come. Bobbleheads, hot dogs, big dudes, and beer. The stadium, a living thing. Little kids fizz like fresh Pepsi. You always loved the game. Didn't you always get picked first in the schoolyard, like stepping into a good dream? The ball in your hands, you were a snake with wings. A shimmy, a shake, and the defense disappeared. Then came your faith in highlights. Catch, cut back, touchdown, blood. the stars pointing up to a God they knew kept score, and the cheerleaders, sequins in their eyes, smiles you hoped meant something sexual. The TV sizzled and blazed, and the players on your posters promised someday you might never be alone. Crossing a street, cruising the mall, your face, the big surprise. Your long run, the ESPN on everyone's lips. You had to believe a bright jersey and a good arm could change everything, even your tough country. And weren't they wonderful? Those days when you knew nothing could catch you, running like he was late for the last bus. And maybe what gave you that sidestep, that blind speed, was partly fear. The past, reset, always scheming to chase you down. But wasn't the NFL the Emerald City? Weren't you the flying house for a while? Weren't you Dorothy? Weren't you the Scarecrow and the Wizard of Oz? Hard for anyone to believe that history is no dream. The stadium rings even now like a medieval cathedral. The anthem fades. The uneasy citizens take their seats. These days, you watch it all on TV. You remember bright mustard, fresh meat boosting the breeze. And when one team starts to lose, the shouts and jeers replay some old questions. Who's bleeding on the field? Who's howling from the stands? How simply this long season continues, like a kind of obedience, a bone bruise that lingers, or some other thing not mentioned in the song. Well, thank you very, very, very much.
Thank you, Tim, for being with us. And I'm sure you were a good wide receiver at Southern Methodist, but
I had my moment.
I, for one, am glad that you turned to poetry.
Thank you, sir.
And in that connection, I want to take this opportunity before we ask some questions to plug both of your most recent two books. One is Fast Animal, which the little sticker tells us was nominated for a National Book Award. It was a National Book Award finalist. Tim's most recent book was One Turn Around the Sun. Both of these published by Etruscan Press and may be ordered from there or from your favorite bookseller. And if this reading doesn't prompt you to buy both of these books, I do not know what would.
Well, you're very sweet. I appreciate that.
Which leads me to the first question, which comes to us from Zanice Bond, who teaches at Tuskegee University. Zanice wonders whether the poems that you read this evening came from these most recent books or not, maybe not exclusively.
Yeah, some came from the books and some were brand new. Some were very new poems.
Another question which has come in from one of your listeners is, what is your daily creative habit?
Well, it's been disrupted some by COVID, of course. My favorite thing in the world to do used to be to get up and go to a coffee shop, and I'd put these earphones on, not for music, but those sound dampers. There's no music in them. They just keep everything out, all the noise out. I'd get a cup of coffee and maybe a favorite pastry, and I would read for a little while, and then I just start working on poems. That's my favorite thing. I would do that virtually every day of the week. Maybe I'd miss once, but not very often. But now with COVID, I don't feel very comfortable going to coffee shops, though some of them are open here, but I wouldn't feel at ease so much. So I haven't done that in a while, but my main routine once was to get up and go out and sit and put on my ear dampers and just write, read for a while and then write. That's my favorite thing to do. So I've had to kind of reinvent a routine during COVID, which has gotten disrupted. If I stay home, I'm tempted to do chores or be distracted by something else that needs to be done. So it's been a little harder to be regular with the writing.
I'm sure that a lot of ourselves have had to, in various ways, reinvent our lives over the past 9 to 12 months. Another question that has come in is this one. When did you discover you wanted to be a writer, and what inspired you? You touched on one of your teachers earlier.
Right.
There may be other elements too.
There are. Even when I was little, I liked to write, but I thought that was normal. I thought everybody liked to write. So a lot of times if it was raining outside and I couldn't go play, for example, my mother once told me, or a couple of times said, well, why don't you go write a story? And so I went upstairs and I wrote a story. And then I wrote another story. And then basically every time I had a chance, unless I really it was beautiful out and it was time to play. I loved, as a kid, you got to go outside. But man, I wrote stories and more stories and more stories. I kept writing stories. And I just thought it was the most fun in the world, partly because I could write whatever I wanted. Now, I didn't know anything about writing. I still have some of those notebooks. And the stories are totally insane. They're mostly science fiction. Things like the crickets that took over the world, the robots from Jupiter, the fish that took over the world. I mean, everything was taken over the world, But I liked it because I could invent the whole story. It was my story. So even when I was a kid, by the time I was 9, I'd probably written 60 pages of stories. Maybe more than that. I had a couple of notebooks full of them. But I wrote, and I liked it then. I didn't know much about poetry. I'd occasionally write some crazy little rhyme thing, but I liked to write from the beginning. And if you had asked me when I was, say, 15, what do you want to do when you grow up? I would have said, I want to play pro football and write novels in the off season. That's what I would have said. So I think I liked writing from a very early age, but I discovered poetry seriously in college. And once I understood, or thought I understood, what poetry could be, that was really it. I still love prose, and I hope to write prose, more prose. But poetry is my first love, and probably will be always in my blood loudest. So probably when I was 19, I probably thought, that's it. Poetry, and I would just, all the energy that I had previously put into football, I put into poetry.
I would imagine there's some poems tucked away, hidden away in those early stories that you wrote.
Maybe, well. But it was total madness, though. I love it, but it was really crazy.
Somebody asks a question that I'm going to expand on slightly. The question is, what is your favorite poem? But I'm going to say, what is your favorite poem, and who are some of your favorite poets, particularly among those writing today?
Oh, man, that is a very complicated question. I don't have a favorite poem. There are many poems that I love at different moments. One of my favorite poems is the one I worked with I read at the workshop earlier this evening, Hag Riding by Lucille Clifton. I love that poem. But I also love In a Dark Time by Theodore Rutke, which is another amazing poem. I think there's a poem by Terence Hayes. Some of you may know him. He's probably the most well-known poet living now, maybe. He's got won just about every award. I think he has a I think he has a poem called Amphibian, but I could be wrong about that. But I love that poem, among others that he wrote. Man, there are so many people that I love. Pablo Neruda. I mean, I could go down the list on poems of his that I like. There's one poem that he wrote that I especially love, called "Walking Around." It's the one, I think it's his only poem that he titled in English. It was not a Spanish title for it. He called it "Walking Around," which I think is very mysterious. I wrote a poem of my own really based on that poem. It's the last poem in my fourth book, Buffalo Head Solos. It's called Really Breathing. And I really take his gesture and just amp it up and connect it to race and other things and politics and stuff. But yeah, that's a favorite poem of mine. There's a poem called Breath by Mark Strand that I love. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. I love lots and lots of poems. The longer I've lived, the more poems I've discovered that I love. So I can't really tell you what my favorite poem is.
Yeah, I'm sure for most of us, there are lots of them out there.
Yeah.
Another question. We'll take several more questions. Here's one. What challenges do you face when beginning to write? And I take that, I could take that in two ways. One might be, what challenges does a beginning writer face? Or on the other hand, what challenges do any of us face as we sit down to write? So I'll let you respond to that in whatever way you see fit.
Well, I think when you're a young writer, if you're just beginning to want to write, the first thing you're faced with is your own incompetence. You just don't know what you're doing. I mean, basically. And you might have a great rush of energy and you might have a good imagination, but changing those things into good poems is not easy. You know, it's not unlike, though maybe you won't quite understand the analogy. It's not unlike if someone handed you a saxophone and you didn't play sax and said, play. You might have energy and passion and everything. You just don't know how to play the sax. So you just make terrible noises. In poetry, it's similar. There are things that you must understand about the form of poetry, how poems move, what is it, how language works, basically, and how can you compress a relatively large experience into a relatively small space. Even a long poem is not very long compared to a novel or a short story. And so you just don't know what you're doing. And so that's hard because you feel things deeply, but you can't say the thing that you feel. You end up burping some few words of some kind that don't really match the intensity of what is felt. So that's a challenge as a young writer. But like with anything, you practice, you work, you practice, and someday you'll be able to play English like a really good sax player plays the saxophone. That's what it's all about initially. Now, if on an individual day, like starting a poem at this age in at this point in my life now, starting a poem, I don't know whether it's hard exactly. I mean, I hear lines and words in my head a lot. You just don't know if they're going to turn into good poems. I mean, that's the thing. The most difficult thing is getting to that point in a poem where you know there's something there, but you have to begin to revise to clarify what the real thing is. Sometimes it's like panning for gold. You got a bunch of stuff, a lot of mud and murk in the pan. You're sifting it around and you're trying to find that part that shines. And that can be tough. The beginning to write itself is not that hard. We all have lots of thoughts. And you just begin with a thought, any thought. It's cold outside. That's the start of a poem. I'm really tired today. That's the start of a poem. You just don't know where it's going to go. And so there's a moment when you really do feel you're in the poem, like there's something that's happening here. And the real difficulty is the revision process and trying to make the poem shine, to make it speak in this resonant, clear way. That can take months or years, depending on the poem. Sometimes you can do it in 2 weeks, but you just gotta be with it till it's ready, till it's finished.
You're commenting on the development both of younger poets and also the development of poetry as we work. Brings to mind another question that I have, and that is, what would you say about how your work has developed? You've written 6 full volumes of poetry, 2 chapbooks, and a number of other things as well. And I ask that in part because the most recent book, One Turn Around the Sun, seems decidedly different from the previous book and also from the others.
I agree with you.
What would you say about your evolution as a poet?
I agree with you. I think that book is kind of different. It's much more somber. Not as much play in that book. There's some play, but there's not as much. I think the thing that really influenced the writing of that book was my parents being very ill. I was working on that book when it became pretty clear to me that my parents were probably not going to be alive much longer. My mother was showing clear symptoms of Alzheimer's, and my father had had a stroke that had him bedridden. And, once someone is bedridden, usually spells close to the end. You got to move to live. And he really couldn't do much but sit or lay down. That's all he could do. And so that affected my mood, certainly. I felt much more, I don't know, my heart was heavier writing that book, basically. And also I'm getting older too. And so you begin to see certain things differently. I'm now officially a senior citizen. Now I'm 65, You'll
be able to get a vaccination pretty soon.
Yeah. Not too soon in Virginia, but not too far from now. And so I think there's a different way of engaging life. As you get older, you realize, one, that you won't be here forever. I think when I was 20s, 30s, I figured I'd live to be like 5,000, 6,000 years old. I just thought I'll just be here basically to the end of time. But there's a point at which you realize that's not the case. And that probably had something to do with the feeling that permeated that book. Though I have, as I said, there's play in it, and I have some fun in that book too. But I would say the overarching gesture is pretty serious, measuring certain aspects of my own life in relation to my family and to my family's history. But in terms of how my poems have developed, boy, that is $1 million question, Ken. You write, and as you mature, your sense of poetry matures. I mean, the ideas that you find yourself wrestling with are the ideas of an older person, and your understanding of craft, your understanding of how to approach poetry changes to accommodate the difference in your own perceptions, I mean, I imagine you face something similar in your own writing life. You don't write like you did when you're 25. You just don't. It's not that I don't see connections. I do see connections between my work at 25 and now. But I just think the way I handle composition is different because I'm different and older. And I like to think I understand more about poetry and composition.
Good. Let's close it out with one more question, Tim.
Sure.
This one asks you to let us know where else we can hear you read your work online, or where else can we turn for interviews with you online? That's a hard question, I know, because I've personally looked online and realized there are a number of places that you could point to, but maybe there are 2 or 3 sources that folks would be interested in following up on.
Well, it's very kind if someone's interested in following up on me. There's a lot of YouTube entries on me. some better quality than others. So you put my name in Tim Seibles YouTube, things will come up. You can see me read poems. That long poem that Ken referred to, One Turn Around the Sun, at the center of the last book, I read the entire thing. I read the entire thing at the Split This Rock Festival, and that's a really good recording of that poem if you're interested in how it sounds. Otherwise, you can find different things online, mostly YouTube things. I'll do different kinds of Zoom readings here and there. There's one that I'm going to do on February 11th. I can tell you that right now, and you should check it out anyway. I'm going to read with John Murillo and I think Randall Horton, and we're all warming up for a book party for Martin Espada. He's got this new book out, Floaters, and we're just going to warm up for him, and then he's going to read from the book. It's his reading. We're just tuning up for him. That's February 11th. So if you search Martin Espada, Espada, you'll see me in this reading with these other guys, all of whom I think are lovely poets. So that's one way to catch me. Otherwise, you can always just throw my name in the search engine and readings may come up. But I don't really know how I could be. I don't have a pipeline to where I'm reading, so I don't really know. But thank you for your interest, and it was a real pleasure for me.
I might say in that connection, in relating to online access, this particular program will remain accessible online for an indefinite period of time.
Oh, good.
For those who go to the museum, the Jewel Colin Smith Museum of Fine Art YouTube site or Facebook site, I believe they archive these indefinitely.
Oh,
so
wonderful.
That's another source, Tim, for you to know about, and also for our audience to know about.
That's great.
If you have friends who you think might like to have a look at what has gone on this evening but missed the program, please pass that along to them, and you see on the little banner below Tim where they can do that.
Oh, I see. Yeah. I need to write it down. But it's gone.
I'll send it to you. Don't worry about it.
To me later. Yeah. Thanks.
Tim, it has been a true pleasure to have you with us. I only wish that we could have had you here in person.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe the online reading enabled some folks to tune in who would not have been able to come to the museum in person to hear the program. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ken. Hey, man, I thank you for the invitation and for all you've done. I appreciate it. It was a pleasure for me.
We appreciate it, and best of luck to you, Tim.
Thank you, pal, and thank you, Christy.
Yes, thank you, and thank you, Tim, and thank you, Ken, for hosting tonight. We thank everyone for joining us this evening. The museum reopens on February 9th, featuring John James Audubon's work, paired with specimens from the Museum of Natural History. Also, we have the work of graphic novel memoirist Leila Quintero Weaver, who will be joining us virtually on February 18th for a talk, so definitely check that out. Our newest exhibition, Bernini and the Roman Baroque, Masterpieces from Palazzo Chigi and Aricia, will all open on February 9th. For more information on our latest exhibitions and upcoming programs, we invite you to check out our website, and you can sign up on our email list there at jcsm.auburn.edu. Thank you so much, and have a good night.